Hey there, I'm so thrilled to spend Mother's Day with you, to get to hang out and talk about phenomenal moms, medium moms, and maybe some not so good moms. But I'm really happy to hang out with you today. And of course, I have a fantastic joke for you. Why do mother kangaroos hate rainy days? Because their kids have to play inside. Right? In the pouch, get it? I thought that was appropriate for some of us moms who are like doing school with our kids at home and we're like, woo, they're inside all the time. So I thought it was appropriate, especially for this season. But, you know, I want to talk for a few minutes about moms. And I specifically want to look at a mom in the Bible that I think is really helpful and insightful for us and relevant to us. And so you're watching today and you're like, well, I'm not a mom. But the reality is, if you're watching, which you are, obviously, you have or have had a mom. Nobody gets here without having a mom. Now, your mom might have been amazing, might have been medium, mixed bag. She might have been awful or non-existent. But I want to speak today about moms and really what God has to say to us about moms. So I'd invite you, if you have your Bibles, you might want to flip over to Genesis chapter 24, because we're going to look at an interesting mom. Her name is Rebecca. Now, Rebecca was married to Isaac, so she was the daughter-in-law to Abraham. And Abraham, if you remember, I'm going to talk about this for a brief moment, the background for Rebecca, because when we think about our moms, we have to look at their background. How did they grow up? How were they raised? Because background influences how they have mothered us, been our moms. So when you think about Rebecca in the Bible, Abraham sent a servant to his homeland to get a wife for his son Isaac. And when the servant came to Abraham's homeland, the servant made a prayer. Please let the woman who's to marry my master's son, let her come and water all these camels. They had a boatload of camels. So the servant rolls up to this well, and sure enough, Rebecca, who's beautiful, comes and says, hey, let me water all your camels. And then the servant asks, after she does that, the servant asks, who are you? Where are you from? And so the servant gets introduced to Rebecca, and then Rebecca brings the servant to her home, to her mother's home. And it's interesting because when you think about Rebecca, and you're like, why are we doing all this? Because I want you to appreciate Rebecca's background. Rebecca was a sister to Laban. And Laban, just to give you a little bit of a thumbnail there, Laban was very deceptive with his nephew, Jacob. Laban was a deceiver. And when you look at the dialogue that happened with Rebecca and Laban and Abraham's servant, you can see that Laban was kind of aiming for the money and was a little bit shifty in the negotiations. So Rebecca came from that kind of a background, and I would say that influenced who she was and how she mothered her boys. She had two sons, Jacob and Esau. And so it's important to think about what's the background for Rebecca. Gives you some insight into who she is and how she parents. But I would also say for you as well, if you think about what's the background for your mom and where did she grow up? How was she raised? Was she from a Depression era, or was she like a new mom, Maybe she got pregnant out of wedlock. I mean, think about the background for your mom. And as you think about that, we've got a quick video, just short little video here, with some people today, modern, talking about the background for their moms. Let's watch this.
My mom grew up in the 40s in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. Her family had a farm. Her dad worked for the railroad. Her mom was a homemaker, and so her and her two sisters ended up having to work the farm.
My mom, Evelyn Anderson, was born in 1921. She was both a child of the Depression and of World War II. She knew tough times and she knew how to enjoy herself at the same time.
Mom's background: she was born and raised here in Denver, Colorado. She was also a pastor's kid. She grew up as one.
My mom grew up on a ranch in Montana. She was one of two girls, and her father died when she was 17 years old.
My mom was the second oldest of 7 children, and she was the oldest daughter, and she was a Lutheran pastor's kid, a PK.
My mom, she did grow up kind of in the Depression era. She was very young during the Depression, and she was from a pretty middle class family.
My mom grew up in Potter, Nebraska, and she was the youngest of 3 kids and the only daughter.
She acquired a lot of skills and also some core values that she had throughout her life.
I think that really helped her be a good mom because she knew what it was like to grow up as a pastor's kid, and she knew the benefits and the kind of responsibilities that gave.
And both her parents were present that whole time during the Depression, but afterwards my grandfather, her dad, was sent off to fight World War II. And her mom was left alone to raise 3 daughters, and she turned their home into a boarding home.
And her dad and mom ran a grain elevator. Her dad did all of the operation, and her mom did all of the bookkeeping.
I think that's really helpful to think about background because it gives you some insight into our mom's parenting, pluses and minuses. But when you think about it, it's interesting as well to consider when Rebecca got pregnant, and you can read about this in Genesis 25, verses 22 to 23. It says, but the children struggled together within her. So Rebecca's pregnant, and she's having all this like contortions going on inside. And she says, why am I struggling? Why is this pregnancy difficult? This is her first pregnancy. So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be separated from your body, and 1 people will be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. And I find that interesting because her first pregnancy was with twins. And if you had twins in your first pregnancy, woo, that's baptism by fire. I mean, seriously. But hers was particularly difficult because both of those boys were highly active and struggled internally, even within her. And it was helpful that God told her, hey, these are 2 nations, and they're going to wrestle and struggle and have tension, conflict between them. And we see that that's absolutely what plays out. But when you think about the background of your mom and then the pregnancy, how that played out, I want you to look at the good things from your mom. And I want us to look at Rebecca for an example about the good things. So when we look at Rebecca and the good things that she had, if you look at Genesis 25, verses 27 to 29, it says, when the boys grew up, Esau, the older brother, became a skillful hunter, man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man living in the tents. Verse 28, now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. When Jacob had cooked stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. So Jacob got really good things from his mom. His mom taught him about, cooking and kind of being more domestic and hanging out around the tents and being more of a homebody. And that was a good thing for Jacob. I think he felt settled in that. He was a peaceful man, and that was something very valuable and beneficial to him. And I think he appreciated his mom and appreciated her attention, appreciated her nurture and teaching him and really helping and strengthening him. But, when you think about it, you also, and me too, we have all had good things from our moms. Good things in terms of the investments they put in us, things that they were good at, things that we enjoyed that were beneficial. So I want you to watch this brief video clip today from Modern People. What are some good things? And as you watch it, you can think about yourself as well, good things that you've gotten from your mom.
My mom could make anything. She could sew anything. She could cook anything. She could build anything. I don't know of too many things my mom couldn't do.
She was an amazing lady. She was adventurous. We traveled all over the country with an army canvas tent. Doesn't sound like a big deal now, but campsites and traveling was not like what it is now in 1950, the late 1950s. So she was fun.
The good that my mom has is that she is very supportive no matter what. All of my brothers and I, we have very different passions, and no matter what it is, she wants us to succeed. She's very supportive in that. And also she loves unconditionally. So we could have messed up in the worst way possible, and she would still love us and she would still support us.
My mom was an important part of the family business, and she kept the home running smoothly.
One of the best things I remember about my mom, she was very present in all of our lives. There's 4 of us kids. I have 3 older brothers. and she was extremely present. And what I mean by that is, for example, Mom always picked us up from school, and she didn't like to carpool. And I remember one time asking her, Mom, how come we're not, we don't carpool? And she said, well, I like to hear your stories. She says, I know that first half hour to hour when you get out of school is when you want to talk and you want to tell me about your day.
My mom never had the same sense of humor that my dad and I had. Usually she never got any of the jokes that we thought were funny. But sometimes something would tickle her so much, and she would begin to laugh, and it was uncontrollable, and she couldn't stop. And this would last for at least like a quarter of an hour or so.
One of my favorite things about my mom is just how much she loves her kids and how much she loves her family.
She is just super good at loving people, and especially us. Yeah.
She picked us up from school, and she would take us home and sit us at the kitchen table and give us milk and cookies. And so we established this precedence in our life where we told Mom about our lives. We told her about our days.
And we always thought it was really funny. We never thought what she was laughing at was that funny, but we always thought she was funny.
She's kind of like a honey badger if you mess with her kids. And I always love that about her.
But the thing that I love most about my mom is that she was always there. When I was a little guy and when I was a big guy, she was always there to help me heal, help dry my tears, and let me know that everything was going to be okay.
It's always fantastic to celebrate the good things. I always like, woo, the good, the good, the good. I want to always be like that half full, glasses half full type person, optimistic. But the reality is too, sometimes there are bad things. Sometimes our mom doesn't do everything right. And Rebecca, she didn't do everything right. In fact, there was bad with Rebecca. And I want us to look for a brief moment at some of the bad things that she did, specifically in Genesis 27. Because in Genesis 27, she tells Jacob, because she hears that her husband Isaac is going to bless Esau. So she tells Jacob, and she's super manipulative. She's like, go in and deceive your dad, pretend like you're Esau so you can get the blessing. That's deception, and that's manipulation. And when Jacob's like, hey, Mom, what happens if Dad figures out that I'm faking him? He's going to be really mad at me. He's going to curse me. And Rebecca's like, that's fine. Let the curse be on me. And I think that's, she's being manipulative, she's being deceptive, and she's being controlling. These are not good things for a mom. And you say, well, maybe she was trying to rationalize it in her mind. She knew the prophecy from God when she was pregnant that Jacob would rule over Esau. That's what God said. So maybe she was trying to facilitate, do that, help God. But nevertheless, I don't think you can ignore and dismiss the reality that she was manipulative, she was deceptive, and she was controlling. Those were bad things. It was bad for her marriage, and ultimately it created conflict, tension, facilitated the conflict and tension that was already there between Jacob and Esau. It made it even worse, actually, because Esau, after Jacob tricked Isaac for the blessing, Esau was so mad he was ready to kill Jacob. So, there's some bad stuff in this as well. And I bring this out because on Mother's Day, we love to celebrate the good things and really, honor our moms. And that's really significant, it's important, and it's helpful. But at the same time, I think it's very useful and valuable that we also recognize, acknowledge, hey, there could have been some bad things as well. Now, bad doesn't have to look like this manipulative, controlling woman like Rebecca. Bad could look like other things as well. So I want you to watch this video clip now to see a couple of bad things from modern day kids. They look back and they're like, well, my mom didn't do this good. This was a bad thing about my mom. Watch this. And some of it's really fun and encouraging, a little light, but really interesting as well, and helpful that we can be honest with about our moms, the good and the bad, and not just camp on one or the other. So let's watch the bad part and have some fun with that.
I I don't know of anything bad that my mom did. The only thing that I wish that she had is it conquered some fears. My mom had a fear of rattlesnakes, and she also had a fear of water. And
her downside, she couldn't make a pie. She tried to organize pies, and she would turn the crust gray because she would mess with it and mess with it and mess with it. Overall, she was a great mom. We had a great childhood.
And the bad, I think that maybe my mom came up a little bit short, was growing up we traveled a lot, and so something that we were taught from a very young age was how to be cautious and how to kind of be on our guard. And I think that that was really helpful growing up and traveling around the world, but some of those really early lessons that I was taught have kind of stuck with me, and I've become overly cautious of people, of situations, even to the point where it kind of evolved into a little bit of a fear.
My mom battled depression all of her life, and it was hard on all of us.
One of the bad things, or things that mom was bad at, and this may be an odd thing, Sarah, I don't know if this is what you wanted, but she was really bad about obsession with food. She was always looking at the next health thing, or the next diet, or the next some sort of thing that would save and that would fix for her any health problems she had. And she was that way for as long as I can remember.
I don't know if there's a bad thing about my mom, but if there was, it's how much she will make you eat.
Well, Mom was never technically proficient or mechanically inclined, and my dad used to tease her that we should hire her out to manufacturers for her to test their products, because if it could be broken, my mom would figure out how.
Like, I want to reiterate, my mom is great and I love her, and I had to rack my brain, but I think that maybe I could have lived life a little bit freer had it been for, you know.
She won't serve herself, but she'll make sure that you eat.
And she feared for her kids a lot. When we would travel, my mom would always worry. And maybe that's just being a mom.
I think it's really helpful to say, okay, our moms, our earthly moms, they're mixed. They have some really great stuff, some medium stuff, but they have some bad stuff too. And despite the best moms on the planet, everyone I've talked to that, they talk about their moms and some of the most magnificent moms, you still see these shortfalls, things that are deficiencies, weaknesses. So every mom is human and imperfect, flawed, and doesn't do it all right. So it's good to acknowledge that and not just dismiss and ignore it. But the main thing I would say to you, the important thing here is, what are the choices that you make? Because our moms put good stuff in us. We might have gotten some bad stuff from our moms. But what about the choices that we make? Now that we're growing and we're like fully formed adults or moving in that direction, what are the choices that we make? And I think this is really powerful because we look at Jacob, and what are the choices that Jacob made? If you think about his background, his dad, he didn't have such a great relationship with his dad. And his mom, mixed bag, pluses and minuses. But Jacob made choices, and they were very significant, important choices. And I think he models for us the choices that we can and should make as well. So when you think about the choices that he made, I'd like for you to flip and just watch this here with me, because these choices, he chose to walk with God in these decisions. So when he ran away from home because Esau was going to kill him, Jacob had a very powerful experience, Jacob's ladder. He had a vision from God, and God spoke to him and said, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to protect you and take care of you until I bring you back here. And when Jacob woke up from that vision and dream, he's like, oh my goodness, God was here and I didn't even realize it. And he made choices. And then as you keep looking at Jacob, he continued to make choices as well, because he chose to walk with God, and he chose to walk with God both in adversity, in uncertainty, and in continuity. So when he lived with Laban, and Laban was a very deceptive, manipulative guy, no shock there, but God prospered Jacob, God protected Jacob, God looked after Jacob, and Jacob recognized God's hand on his life. And when he left Laban and he came back to his promised land, he wrestled with God. We read about that wrestling match, and Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And you look at the choices that Jacob makes. He makes the choice to hold on to God. He makes the choice to walk with God. And he makes the choice to be continuous and steady with God. Because after the wrestling match, God renames him and says, I'm going to call you Israel instead of Jacob. He changes his name, and the change of name also goes with the change of character. Instead of being a deceiver, that's what Jacob means, Jacob becomes Israel, which means one who wrestles with God. And I'd rather be known as a wrestler with God than a deceiver. But when he comes into his homeland, he sets up another altar at Bethel, the same place where he had the dream the first time. And he acknowledges and worships God. And then you see him consistently over the time that he's in his homeland, he worships God. And even when at the end of his life, when he's going down to Egypt, he continues to worship God. He sets up another altar and has an experience with God speaking and talking to him, saying, I'm leading you down here to Egypt to rescue your family. So you watch Jacob and the choices that he made. He could have gotten bitter. He could have gotten angry. He could have looked at the adversity that he was in and been very upset about it. But he chose. He consistently chose to follow and walk with God and be consistent and steady with God. So I just encourage you today that as we celebrate Mother's Day, let's make good choices. Let's make choices, number one, to accept the good. Accept the good from our moms. Our moms have some really fantastic things. But also, number two, acknowledge the bad. When we kind of ignore the bad, well, blah, 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 that's not helpful because our moms are human. And, you know, on Mother's Day, you're like, well, you just need to accentuate the good. And I think that's a nice, good strategy, but I think it's helpful as well to acknowledge, hey, my mom was human. She didn't do everything right. There was a few blips, and maybe there was a lot of blips for you. Some moms were not very good moms. Some moms were magnificent. Some days, for some people, this day is a very difficult day. For some people, this day is a day of great celebration and honor. And some people love this day, and some people hate this day. But no matter what, let's, number one, accept the good. Number two, acknowledge the bad from our moms. But number three, let's pay attention to the choices that we make, and let's be consistent. Hear me really well with this. Let's be consistent with God's blueprint in our lives. How did God organize and structure you internally? How did he fearfully and wonderfully knit you together on the inside? Because your mom, good or bad, let's be consistent. Let's go with God's design in our lives and walk consistently like Jacob. And did he do it all right? He did not. And you won't, and I certainly don't. But let's go and determine and be steady that the choices we make in our lives are consistent and loyal in following God and walking out God's design and blueprint in our lives. So thank you so much for watching. We're really thrilled what God is doing, even in this time. In this season, you know, it's interesting, all the challenges that people are going through, but I am also hearing some phenomenal experiences that you're having with God. And so I just encourage you that on this Mother's Day, let's press into God and let's really experience God and all the loving kindness God has for us as in a maternal way, and also in a paternal way, mothering and fathering, that God is our perfect parent. So God bless you. Remember, we have really amazing things happening with our kids, with our youth, with young adults, college kids. You can watch the website for that stuff, watch Facebook because there's updates on that as well. We love you very much, and I know Wednesday is going to be a super powerful sermon. Thanks so much for watching.